Hello and welcome to Talk to Stu with me, Stuart McGoo, and I'm joined this evening, as always, by my co-host and producer, Becky Plant, who is behind the scenes and moderating the chat. So, behave. Good to see you all. Thank you all for joining us again, and hope everybody is doing well in these difficult and uncertain times that we seem to constantly be in. And maybe that's just life, we don't know. So if you're new to the channel and this stream, this is an opportunity to have a bit of a Q&A with me, where I will endeavour to answer your benefit questions. I'm just realising I've left my little benefits Bible somewhere that's not right next to me, so I might have to go and grab that in a minute. But first, we are going to start off with some news stories, just while everyone gets settled into the chat and throws in a few questions for us to answer. So, over the last month or so, there hasn't been any huge changes going on in the world of PIP and universal credit, as obviously quite a large number of changes coming over the next year or two were announced back in the spring statement and were previously announced in the autumn statement last year. So what's currently happening is there's a transforming support white paper going round, which is being consulted on, and people are throwing in their two penneth from all sides of the floor in Parliament. On top of that, lots of organisations, disability rights organisations and so on and so forth, are making their views on the white paper heard. So there's quite a few things going on there. Now, keeping abreast of all these changes, particularly if you yourself are disabled, can be quite difficult. So I do recommend the disabilitynewsservice.com. They tend to go into a little bit too much, not too much, but they go into a lot of detail with things. And so they are generating content on an almost daily basis. Partly because, as we know, we've got search engine optimization, so you need to generate content to keep on top of Google things. So you don't need to look at this every day, because you will find that some news reports are kind of repeating some of the same things. But it does give you a sort of blow-by-blow, up-to-date account of what's going on. So it's certainly worth keeping them on your bookmarks, on your phone or on your computer, whatever you use to connect, and have a look at those changes as they happen. They also give us a bit of an idea of what's actually, how things are actually affecting disabled people. So one of the reports that's out there at the moment is that PIP phone waiting times, so that's personal independence payment, the waiting times on the phone have been increasing pretty steadily since Christmas. Personally, myself, I have found that generally speaking, if I have to phone the personal independence payment department for any reason, I'm usually on the phone waiting for about 40 minutes until somebody answers my call. That can be quite stressful for people, obviously, if you've got issues with anxiety and things like that. So bearing that in mind, and bearing in mind that we've just had a knock at the door from an Amazon person, so Becky's just going to pop off and deal with that while I carry on talking, such as the live TV. There we go. So that's dealt with. Back in January, apparently the average wait time was 23 minutes, and that's sort of steadily been increasing. And the information that most news organisations have been tracking is that the average is 35 minutes. When this question was asked in Parliament, Tom Pursglove, who's one of the DWP ministers, told the floor that in fact they were even higher than that, generally around 44 minutes. So those waiting times are slightly starting to come down, but that's something that you must bear in mind when you are making these phone calls, as it can be quite stressful being on the phone waiting for them. Now, the DWP during these sessions has also admitted that it is too slow, too inaccurate, too costly, and that claimants don't trust them. Well, we all know that. It's good that they've sort of admitted it, but this is a part of the rhetoric for bringing in and introducing this white paper and the changes that they're going to be making. So we have to sort of be careful of the fact that they're admitting to problems, because admitting to problems just at the point when they are bringing in a raft of changes which are meant to improve things, is a bit, I don't know, disingenuous, a bit misleading. Why didn't they admit that there were those problems, say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or even right when PIP and everything started? So we've got to be careful of that. It's to kind of pave the way, you might say. Now, one of the big questions that is on everybody's mind is around personal independence payment, whether or not it is going to end up being means tested. Now, the Tories have kind of batted this away when they've been asked this question generally, but very recently there was a focus group that met, and that focus group had questions asked of it about whether people deserve various benefits based on their income, and looking at means testing extra cost benefits. So when we're talking about extra cost benefits, we're talking about personal independence payment, disability living allowance, which still exists for some adults, but generally most people have been moved on to personal independence payment now, but does still exist for children, and attendance allowance, which is the disability benefit for people over pension age. So a disabled person that attended those groups found that the questions that were being asked by people that were maybe of a conservative leaning background were pushing that focus group to answer questions in that discussion. Now, it did form part of a paper called the Shaping Future Support Green Paper, which came out 2 years ago, and there was talk about creating a new single benefit that would encompass DLA, PIP and so on and so forth. Nothing really further has happened with that, but it's still on the table according to Therese Coffey back in 2021. Tom Pursglove, on the other hand, said in a written answer that there were no plans at the moment to means test DLA and PIP. Now, that's a very key phrase that Conservative politicians often use. We have no plans to increase VAT, they said before they increased VAT. We have no plans to do these things. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do it. So this is something that we need to be aware of. Now, generally speaking, that shouldn't affect most of the people that are in the position where they're on universal credit, because universal credit is a means tested benefit. So if you are in the sort of ESA element of universal credit, or you're on old style ESA or new style ESA, which isn't under universal credit, then you probably will continue to get PIP. And in fact, PIP is going to become something that defines your fitness to work in the future. And again, there's a lot of questions around that. So that is what's sort of happening. So it's difficult to keep up when there's not actually any big changes that have been announced. So using the Disability News Service is kind of good, because we get these sort of, it's the rumour mill essentially, but people are asking questions of people and testing the water, seeing how politicians are reacting and things like that, and little bits of information that come through from Prime Minister's questions and questions in the House and things like that. So you kind of pick up on what's going on. In other news, the government has reaffirmed its contract with Capita, so unfortunately Capita will still be delivering personal independence payment assessments, and that's going to continue for at least another 12 months, if not 3 years with them. Of course, their handling of PIP claims has been linked to a number of disabled people's deaths, including suicides, and that can be quite understandable, though those links are obviously refuted by the government as not being direct links, though that they do recognise in some cases that things could have been handled in a better way or a more expedient way. So one slight piece of good news in all of this is PIP waiting times for a decision on the assessment have come down, but what would be interesting to know is, have they come down because everyone's being told no? That would be a good question I think we need to ask, but there we go. So one more thing, just for universal credit, obviously we have just recently seen the first cost of living payments come through, and then also for people on disability benefits we've seen the cost of living payments land for those guys, and indeed the next round of cost of living payments will not now be till the autumn. However, just a reminder, if you haven't received a cost of living payment and you think you should have, or you're not sure if you should have, then either call the Universal Credit helpline and ask them if you're eligible and if you can expect one, or call the appropriate disability benefit support line, so the PIP support line or the Children's DLA support line, whichever, just to check whether or not you are due that payment and whether you're eligible for it. Okay, so the next round of those should be coming to us in the autumn, in October. Okay, so let's open it up to some questions if there are any.
No questions as such. Just Joe Wall has said at the moment their PIP isn't taken into consideration with her special guardian allowance, but if it becomes means tested, she will lose that, and she uses that money to support her boy.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note. So when we talk about these benefits being extra cost payments, or when the government talks about them being extra cost payments, that is principally what those payments were set up for in the first place, is to meet those extra costs that we have when we're dealing with a disability. They're not supposed to be used as income payments. Okay, so they shouldn't be what we need to get in to be able to survive. But with the spiralling cost of everything over the last 10 years, and certainly the extreme spiralling that's happened in the last 2, people are much more reliant on using that not just to meet those extra cost needs, but actually to meet their daily living needs as well. It's perfectly possible that some people might fall out of the means tested group, and I'm not telling people this to worry people unnecessarily. It's just to keep your eye out on these things and keep abreast of these things. It might be that the means test is set very differently. The means test for housing benefit, for example, is quite different to the means test for universal credit in terms of how much you are allowed to keep in savings, and things like that is quite a lot higher. And again, the same with council tax support is quite a bit different to the way that the benefit means test is calculated for universal credit. So it may well be that we're seeing something that is a much higher proportion, because generally speaking, a disability benefit can be paid to somebody in or out of work. So if you're in work, you still will have extra costs as a result of your disability, and it may be that your income doesn't meet those extra costs. However, part of this white paper is that they will be looking at more in-work support for people who are working through different routes, using things like access to work and such. So it's not, as I say, not confirmed that they are going to do that at the moment. It's just something we need to be aware of, and don't panic just yet. So I did want to also pick up on one thing. Edward Brown, a big hello to you. He's joined us again this evening. He tells us he's an admin for a group on...
He's tried to post the link, but they're not showing up. So I've just asked him for the name of the Facebook group so I can read it out to you. He's also identified an e-learning course. I'm just going to Google that because for some reason the links aren't showing up in the chat, which is a shame.
Okay. So obviously with the YouTube channel, I have got certain filters set on it, so that prevents people from dropping spam in there, but more importantly stops people from swearing or being abusive and things like that. Obviously some things could slip through, and that's why Becky's doing what she's doing, but there are those automatic things on there. So if you are posting a link, obviously it would be better if people could click on it and link straight through to it. But if you break up the link in some way, so put a space between the .com, and then people can at least copy it into their browser and then maybe delete the space, something like that. That might be a way of getting around it. But yeah, certainly that also reminds me of something that I wanted to inform everyone about this evening, which is wellbeing and recovery colleges. So currently across the UK, most NHS trusts, not all of them, it's not in every area, but quite a lot of NHS trusts have been setting up things called wellbeing and recovery colleges. So whatever area you're living in, you should be able to use one of these websites to be able to access courses that will help with a number of different things to do with your well-being and your recovery from mental health issues or other health issues. And quite a good few of these websites also provide courses that help deal with benefits or with getting into a job or IT skills, things like that. So that's something that's worth having a quick Google search on your area, type in Wellbeing and Recovery College, and you might find something that's suitable for you, where you can access free training, either online or face-to-face in many cases, which could be quite useful to you and help you with those things. Obviously, that's not necessarily completely benefits related, but it's certainly something worth doing. Becky's just diving into seeing if she can sort out these links.
So I haven't found the name of the Facebook group, but I've seen that there is a site called Benefits and Work Guides You Can Trust, and they can keep you updated with any changes if you sign up. I can't see if there's any cost or anything, so I'm not sure if this is the one, but there are essential e-learning courses for claimants and carers, organisations and professionals. It says free PIP, ESA and universal credit updates delivered fortnightly, so that might be one of them.
Yeah, that sounds good. So that one's worth checking out. What was it called again?
It's called Benefits and Work Guides You Can Trust, and the logo is a nice dog, so that's surely that's trustworthy.
Yes, Benefits and Work Guide You Can Trust, and that's benefitsandworks.co.uk.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that was just from a Google search where I put the PIP Essentials e-learning course through Google. Sarah Brown says that they have one in London and Liverpool, recovery colleges.
Excellent.
That's good. Brilliant. We don't have many questions today.
No, and that's absolutely fine, because we have sort of been working as a bit of a closed group recently, because I haven't been pushing out videos to kind of try and get more people aware of the channel and bring people into things. So that's absolutely fine. But obviously there are other things that I can talk about quite easily. So one thing that I wanted to have a little chat with people about, if people are interested, on the back of our last show. So as you know, we did a kind of a dual show, which was more of a podcast type thing, less about answering direct questions, but more about having conversations with everybody who joins in on the channel. And we've been mostly talking about mental health and things like that. So I wanted to follow on from that and just talk a little bit about mental health when applying for disability benefits, because I know that this is something that comes up as a topic quite often for people on my channel. And if what I say in this is useful to people, then I can maybe chop it into another little video that might be useful to them. So one of the big questions that I get asked quite a lot is, how do you get across your mental health needs in a PIP form, first of all, and then also in a PIP assessment? And indeed, what kind of qualifies a person for receiving PIP with mental health issues? So there's a number of different things to look at with mental health issues. So first of all is, what sort of issue is it? Is it about mood and depression, anxiety, worry, those kind of things? Even if they're quite severe, they're a certain type of mental health issue that is kind of a little bit difficult to define exactly. Then you have other issues which are more cognitive. So where a person has a poor memory, where they get confused easily, that might be variable, it might happen at different times, it might be linked to another health issue that they have, things like that. It could be to do with processing, sequencing, doing tasks in the right order, putting your t-shirt on and then your jumper, not your jumper and then your t-shirt, although some people might do that as a fashion choice, but certainly making sure your underwear's on the underside of your clothing, that kind of thing. So there are things like that. And then of course you've got a lot sort of higher level mental health issues, which could be related to a learning disability. It could be related to something neurological, which again might lead to neurocognitive issues, but also might lead to sort of extreme or variable mental states. And of course, on top of all of this, we have some of the classic personality disorders that some people might have, which can be quite debilitating, such as schizophrenia and borderline personality disorder, things like that. So how do you get all that across in the form? Well, it's very difficult because you can only get awarded a certain amount of points at certain areas. But for example, with cognitive issues, they are going to have an impact on most of the daily living tasks. They're going to have an impact on cooking. They're going to have an impact on remembering when to eat, remembering when to wash, personal care, using the bathroom, all of those kind of things, as well as, more typically, reading, managing money, and those kind of things. So those things, it's relatively simple to get the cognitive impact of those things across in those areas on your form. What you also need to think about is, how do I get things like anxiety into those areas as well? So anxiety and depression can be more tricky to demonstrate, but again, they have an impact on all of your daily living activities. If you're too depressed to get out of bed or get washed or dress or any of those things, that all matters, and that could be the difference between 0 points and 1 point or 2 points on each of those areas. Depression and anxiety can also cause minor problems with memory as well. They're not quite the same as cognitive problems, and some people can actually have quite severe memory impact from maybe some of the medication that they're taking. But again, that can affect concentration with reading, taking in information when speaking to health professionals, things like that. Clearly, mixing with other people is a big area on the form where mental health issues will impact. So in cognitive terms, a person needs to be safe when they're out mixing with other people, particularly if they're following the route of a journey, which is another important question. but it could also be that somebody with anxiety and depression is obviously impacted from mixing with other people. So getting that across in the form is the first stage. The next stage is, of course, then dealing with that in the phone call. So, for example, if somebody, when they're doing the phone call, is quite hard of hearing, which obviously isn't a mental health issue, that comes across quite easily when they're speaking to somebody over the phone. And so people are going to the assessor at the other end is going to very quickly understand that that person can't hear them. But how do you get that across with the mental health side of things? The best thing to do is just be yourself as you are at that time on the phone. If they make a decision that you don't agree with, then you must challenge it afterwards. It is much safer and much easier for you and your mental health to deal with something in as a letter with support from your family or from a trained professional, from the Citizens Advice Bureau or something like that, to form a mandatory reconsideration letter and send that in, than it is to worry yourself too much about how you are on that phone call or in that face-to-face thing. Always have somebody with you for support if you can, and always set something up for yourself to do that is soothing or nice to follow on with afterwards. That will always pay huge dividends for your well-being and mental health after you've done the call, and even in the run-up to the call, that can be quite stressful. Of course, it might not be a phone call, it might be a face-to-face or a video call. We just don't know. It depends on the area and things like that. But the best thing to do is just go through the motions, tick every box, answer every question as you can, and just make mental notes for yourself, or if you've got somebody with you, ask them to make notes for you, even if it's just your side of the conversation. Do also remember that now they are starting to make it a standard thing that they record all the telephone interviews that they do. So you can request that data afterwards if you want to challenge anything that was said, or you feel that your answers were misinterpreted in any way, or that there's anything that you need to extend on afterwards. Okay, so that's my mental health tips for PIP and applying for PIP. So if anyone's got any questions from that, please do let me know. Yes.
So Edward has just confirmed that, yep, that is the correct link, and I've managed to type the link in, which is really cool. It's not free, but there's special discounted rates for carers and claimants at $39.95.
Excellent. Yes, unfortunately, this is one of the things that is becoming more the case at the moment, with services being rolled back and another round of austerity and cuts, as if we haven't had enough of that, coming very soon. Thank you, Rishi Sunak and co. We will be looking at seeing more independent organisations setting up. There could be community interest companies. They might be businesses working towards making not a profit, but fees to keep themselves running, things like that. A non-profit organisation, and they might be charging fees. On one hand, that's not great, because people on low income don't necessarily have the ability to meet those costs always. But quite a few of these organisations will have different funding models, and it might be that people who are really, really struggling, they have some sort of concessionary or discount scheme. So it's always worth checking on that. It is an unregulated industry, and that's something to note. I myself have in the past been doing one-to-one support people, and very occasionally now one-to-one support with people where I have charged a nominal fee for my services. For me personally, I always try to make sure that I deliver the very best standard of support to a person, and that I comply with the advocacy charter and things like that. So it's always important to check the credentials of the person that you're working with, see what experience they've had, if it's an individual particularly, but also have a look at the organisation and what they do. There's a lot more of these organisations popping up now. We've got one in Droitwich in Worcestershire, which is doing really well. And again, they don't ask for a specific fee, but they do say that people have to make a donation of whatever they can afford, which is great. A lot of people do things on a no-win, no-fee basis as well, so that's always worth looking out for. But do check as much as you can before doing these things. But generally speaking, most of the people that are doing these things at the moment do want to help. And if you're paying for a service, it gives you a little bit more of a feeling of ownership, essentially, of the service that you're getting. So yes, I think that's at least covered by trading standards.
Sarah has just said, yep, she had her PIP meeting recorded, her PIP assessment. And Mama Jono says, need someone else to claim for you. Is it possible to have someone else claim for you?
People can fill out the forms for you and sign on your behalf if you're not able to. That needs to be agreed in some way with the Department of Work and Pensions, so they can have you listed as a nominated representative for the person that you're claiming for. That's usually done in a situation where a person themselves can't actually do that because of their health condition in some way. If a person has lost mental capacity to be able to do that, then you would need a lasting power of attorney in place to be able to claim a benefit for them. That's particularly in the case of, say, attendance allowance for people with sort of progressed Alzheimer's who aren't able to understand the situation, those kind of things. But quite often you can get a nominated representative set up in those situations, and that can usually be done over a phone call as long as you're with that person and they can confirm verbally who they are to the Department of Work and Pensions and pass the ID questions, and then having confirmed that, they can then say, yes, I'm happy for this person to be my representative, and the DWP will move forward with that. So always give them a call for whichever benefit it is to check out whether you can do that first.
Edward has got a question, but I'm just waiting for that to come through. In the meantime, Steve, bless you, Steve Armstrong's been on saying, Stu, you need to add super chat to your channel. I, for one, would donate for your advice and time. See, I donate to Stu via cooking him delicious meals and providing cats.
Yes, potentially another cat.
Yes, maybe a kitten.
Maybe
a little tiny kitten.
Whether I like it or not. That's
well,
not true.
To be fair, it's whether Pog likes it.
Yes, the grumpy cat who's...
She was in the corner. She was just in the corner of the sofa. You might have seen her. She's now in the middle. Quite difficult to see against the white and black sofa.
Yes.
She's well camouflaged.
She is. I did try and add some super thanks, I think it was. I put that on the thing, and I think it appeared on there, so I did set that up, but I don't know if it works. If it's not there, do let us know.
So, perfect segue into Edward Brown's question. This is actually amazing.
Is it about cats?
Kind of. How would you answer the question during a PIP assessment? Do you have a pet?
Do you have a pet? This is actually a really important question, and Edward has picked up on this because quite often, particularly around dogs, this is used to trip people up. Not literally, figuratively, of course, but to trip people up in terms of their ability to walk. And these things happen. Now, the government might come out and say, oh no, these assessments are done genuinely and nobody's trying to trip anyone up. But I would disagree with that on the evidence that I've seen. So I've known quite a lot of people who have said that they have a dog. Then they'll be asked, oh, do you walk the dog at all, or do you take the dog out? You must be very not careful, but you should always be honest and truthful. But this might be a point where you need to challenge things afterwards, because I've seen where people have answered this question. What they've said has been misinterpreted, willfully misinterpreted, I would argue, but misinterpreted in some way to meet something else. So they might say, how long do you take the dog out for? And if you say, well, 20 minutes, they'll say, oh, well, you can walk for 20 minutes. And that's not what you said at all. Because what you might be doing is driving to a park, getting out of the car with difficulty, getting your dog out of the car, letting the dog off the lead, let the dog do the walking while you sit on the bench and all of that. So if you're answering a question about walking the dog, for example, do you have a pet or do you walk the dog, say, well, what I do is I take the dog in my car, I get out with great difficulty, I sit on the bench and I let the dog do the walking. And that could be any length of time because I'm sat down and I do not do the walking. So be very clear about exactly what it is that you're doing with that question, particularly with dog walking. This also applies to other animals where there is some level of work involved. So if you've got an aviary, I've been to visit people who've got like aviaries with lots of different little birds in there, and every day they've had to go in and clean out the birds and things like that. And when that question was asked, that was used to demonstrate, well, if you can clean out the birds, then you can probably make a meal for yourself and things like that. So it's about making it very clear how you do these things, if you have any support and things like that. So when these questions are asked, and they are asked a lot more these days, be kind of careful with that.
So Edward refused to answer that question during Sarah's assessment. Are you allowed to refuse to answer? He says there's nothing in the legislation or in the PIP2 forms related to pets.
Exactly. He's quite correct. This is the thing, is those kind of questions you can refuse to answer because they are not specific to this assessment, and it doesn't necessarily have to relate to pets. So it could be relating to a leisure activity that you might engage in. You know, they might ask you, do you keep fit, or have you got any hobbies or something like that? Well, if a person says one of their hobbies is baking, then that can be used to say, well, actually, you can prepare food, sort of thing. Well, it might be your hobby to bake a cake, but you might only be able to do that once a month because most of the month you're in bed with chronic fatigue syndrome and have to eat out of a microwave, and just on the one day where you've got some energy, you bake a cake. So those kind of things, if you're not very careful about how you answer them, or you can, as Edward said, refuse to answer that question because it isn't something that's covered. Now, in the attendance allowance form, there is a section, and in the old DLA forms, there was a section on hobbies and interests, because the way that was done was very different, where you would say, well, look, I used to have this hobby that I do, but since I became disabled, I can't do it anymore, or I do this to keep fit, to keep my health well, and stuff like that. And it was taken reasonably genuinely, and it still does exist there in attendance allowance forms, but it's not part of the PIP assessment, and people have been used to trip it up. And if they give you any static about refusing to answer that question or a similar kind of question, just, you know, end the phone call and fight it through a letter or something like that for mandatory reconsideration.
Steve does say that he has got a dog because it's an emotional support dog, so he tells them that, and they are amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Oh yeah, all dogs are emotional support dogs in my view, and that's not to diminish that. Some dogs are specifically trained to be able to provide support to somebody when they're having a panic attack and things like that. But I think most dog owners would agree that the dogs make their life much better. And if you're disabled and stuck at home most of the time, you know,
it's company,
mental health, it's all of these things. The fact that, you know, I'm in a position where I can't, you know, I need to exercise. I know I need to exercise, but I'm in fear of doing exercise because I know what happens if somebody is.
On that point, because I'm using your login, obviously, I'd said, sorry, I'm working a bit off the cuff today because I've just been doing Couch to 5K, arg. And then 2 comments later, I thought, I'm just going to clarify, this is Becky talking, definitely not Stu. Stu is not doing Couch to 5K.
No, I'm not doing the Couch to 5K. I'm doing the Couch to Couch K. Yeah, and, you know, it's not that I would be exercising all the time, and okay, you can do some stretching and things like that in your own home and stuff, But years ago, I used to do martial arts and things like that. I'd quite like to do some Tai Chi, maybe. That would be quite good. It's a very gentle exercise. But would that be used against me? So, there are days when I could do that. There are days when I definitely couldn't do that. So, it is difficult.
Edward's quite right. He says it gives too much leeway for an assessor to add their opinion. Joe Wall says, they asked me about that, about cooking, and I told them I have a perching stool, like what you have, Stu, and cook enough to freeze for 3 more meals, or cook in stages, as standing for a length of time is difficult. Exactly, Joanne. That's what Stu does as well. He is an amazing cook, so I encourage it.
Yes, but there are a significant number of times I've got the perching stool which I use. Sometimes I can stand up for a period while I'm cooking, and that's absolutely fine. But there's plenty of times I can't, and there's plenty of times where I can't cook at all. And I have to say, Becca's had a really hard day at work, a long day at work, and I have to say, I'm really sorry, love, I cannot cook tonight. You're going to have to do it. Things like that, and we support each other. And and again, the same with washing and bathing. Many of these conditions that people are dealing with are variable and difficult, and it is finding the right balance. And it doesn't mean you're not disabled. It doesn't mean you don't have these difficulties if they're variable, as long as it's the majority of the time, which it is in my case and other people's. And it's a shame that we have to be so careful about explaining ourselves, because the nature of these health conditions is well known by medical professionals, and we shouldn't have to think so carefully about everything we say because somebody's being that disingenuous with the way we talk and assuming.
Sure, it's all about sort of familiarising yourself with what the questions are going to be and being prepared for that eventuality, and knowing, yes, I can cook, but explaining exactly as Joanne has, the reasons I can cook is because I've made reasonable adjustments to allow me to do so. However, it's incredibly difficult. It's so important, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there are extra costs with that. If you think about it, for your health, it is better if you eat a freshly cooked proper meal every day. But if you're dealing with chronic fatigue or some other health problems, something like that, or arthritis or whatever, you're just going to sling and ding quite a lot of times. And that's not great for your health and well-being over time. Once or twice is fine. But, before I met Becky, I was very much reliant on the microwave because, there were so many days in my week where I just couldn't even consider cooking a proper meal. I just couldn't. It was either a pizza in the oven or a thing in the microwave, and that impacted my health long term. So, we shouldn't. Anyway, I'm rambling.
And Edward's just made a really good point that an assistant dog is not a pet. It is a need.
Well, that is a good point, yes. So if you have an assistance dog, for example, a guide dog, I worked at Site Concern. It was great because we had guide dogs in the office quite often, and they'd come into reception. I was working on reception, and they'd be like, "Oh, can we leave the dog in reception with you?" Like, yeah, damn right. So there was always dogs, which was fantastic because we had a guide dogs office in there as well. So the people from guide dogs would come in, and they are assistance dogs. They're not pets in that way, and they're there to provide a service. So if you have got an assistance animal, if you're asked the question, "Have you got a pet?" Edward's quite correct. The answer is no. I have an assistance animal.
Please do. I'm just going to do a bit of tumbleweed.
Yes.
I could probably make it from Pog's hair that she's shedded over the last 20 minutes.
That's true. Yeah. Yes. So, yes. So, okay. How are we doing? 1:45.
It's 2. It's gone quickly.
It has.
Have I missed anyone's questions or comments? Type to me. Oh, Brian Davies, what does this mean in theory? Can stand, then move using an aid or appliance more than 20 metres, but no more than 50 metres? Sorry, Brian, I did miss you.
Right. So can stand or walk using an aid or mobilise using an aid or appliance more than 20 metres but no more than 50 metres. So this is a simple question on the face of it, which is, if you mobilise from one place to another, and the key phrase is stand or walk, using something like that but no more than 50 metres, then that equates to a certain number of points on that question. Okay, if you can demonstrate that that is the case in your answer, both in that question and when you do the assessment. So, for example, if you were going to the shop down the end of your road, and the shop is 100 metres away, and you've got your walking stick or your walking frame, something like that, which supports you, you leave your front door and you walk for that length of time, and you make it all the way 100 metres. You stop at the shop, you buy those things, and then you walk all the way back, and at no point do you stop in that thing, then you've walked 200 metres. Okay, if you do the same journey and you stop after 50 metres and have a rest, then you've walked no more than 50 metres before you need to stop and rest. Things that are really important in this that aren't factored in to this at all is whether or not you're out of breath, whether that changes depending on the surface, and all of those kind of things. All of those things are covered in the blue badge application, for example. So you could say, well, you've got questions like, do you get out of breath walking up a slight hill, or trying to keep up with people of your own age on level ground, and things like that. So within that, it's recognised that these things also have an impact. But with the PIP form, it is literally, can you walk from this place to this place? How far is that? How long that takes you isn't really even concerned, unless they're trying to catch you out in the phone call, as I said before, when it comes to walking the dog and such. But how far can you walk before you need to stop because you've got too much pain, too much fatigue, or whatever it is that causes you to stop. So it's about making that clear as to what your walking distance is. You can add to that in terms of the hills, the variability of your condition as to whether that's some days it's this, some days it's that, and all of those things. But they're looking for the majority of the time. So if for the majority of the time you can't walk more than 50 metres, then you must make that clear. And a good way of demonstrating that is to find something on Google Maps and even specifically tell them what that distance is, and tell them how they can check on Google Maps. I can walk from here to here, and then I need to stop.
Yeah, and Joanne Wall quite rightly says, and it doesn't take into account that walk has caused fatigue for the next 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly. So, very simply, a couple of weeks ago, we wanted to have an afternoon to go into town and get a couple of bits, and we got there, and I got out of the car, and my knee just went boff. That was it. Couldn't even get very far at all, and I was in so much pain, and I was just getting giddy. So I just said, that's it, I've got to go back to the car. Becky carried on, met her friends, and did whatever. I sat in the car for a good half an hour or so until the pain died down, and then went home. Went into town recently, thought, right, make sure I'm taking my mobility scooter this time so we can, get about a bit further. Bloody pissed it down, didn't it? So we were there about 10-15 minutes, and then back in the car. As soon as we got in the car, stopped raining. So, this is the life for disabled people. It's bad enough dealing with British weather, but adding that into it as well, it's just...
Plus the fact, for some reason, we were like completely invisible, and people just kept walking into us. And I was like, Stu, just drive at them now, because I was getting so annoyed. I was like, this is so rude. What on earth? But anyway, that's another whinge.
I'll run over your bloody toes.
See how you like it. No, he didn't, obviously. We were delightful. Ed, I missed your comment. I'm so sorry. Ed made a comment about universal credit migration timeliness, as he doesn't think he'll be migrated until 2028. May apply to someone else. He says, sorry, I know we're not discussing universal credit, but that doesn't matter.
No, that's fine.
Totally can.
Yeah. This is the benefit side of things. So just to reiterate that correction that I did before, so for some people who are being moved over, if they're on the old style ESA, there's been a lot of confusion for me with different reports and things like that, and so there's some videos that exist where I'm saying, oh, it's going to happen by 2024. That is wrong, and I was wrong to say that. It's going to be 2028. So Ed is quite right to point that out. Edward, sorry, is quite right to point. It's Ed. Yeah, sorry. Sure. Oh, so we've got both Ed and Edward. Yeah. Two Eds are better than one. And that wasn't my joke. That was Edward's joke. So yeah, as I say, that's really important to point out that for most people on the old style ESA, that migration will be happening to 2028, not 2024. However, if you're on universal, if you're on any of the other benefits such as working tax credits, those kind of things, income support, all of that sort of stuff, you will be migrated over onto universal credit by 2024. So there we go.
Got a lot of lovely thanks from people. Just wanted to say that Edward Brown had an issue with Trafford Council and their housing policy because they wouldn't allow guide dogs in the high-rise blocks, and he had it overturned. They had to change their policy. I'm shocked.
I'm not. Totally Don't even
shocked.
Get me started on housing at the moment.
Yeah, true.
Probably do. The battle we've had. I'm supporting somebody at the moment with who's been evicted, and just getting her. The bureaucracy is just a nightmare in itself. I'd be interested to know from Edward how long that actually took, that entire process, because I bet that took months and months and months. And why aren't they finding you a more appropriate property if you can't have dogs in that property? It's just ridiculous.
Edward's also given a tip. I find the easiest way to score 8 points for PIP is to focus on aids and appliances. Most descriptors allow 2 points for using an aid or appliance.
Yeah, that's true. If you can demonstrate that you use an aid or appliance in a certain situation, then that's great, because that will help. For a lot of people that don't use aids or appliances, walking sticks is something that bugs me to high heaven. I use a walking stick myself. I'm 46-year-old. You don't see a lot of guys my age using walking sticks. And at first, when I adopted it, I was in my mid-30s, I think. And I was using it occasional to start with, and then it builds up. And there is a stigma about it, something like that. And you see older people, for example, and you look at them and you go, oh my God, why aren't you using a stick? You're going to go flat on your face in a minute, sort of thing. And one of the reasons I use it is partly to reduce the pressure on my joints and my legs and so on, but is also for balance and those kind of things. So, but at the same time, it's these persons' choice to be independent, and that should be encouraged. It might be my personal view that maybe they would be safer if they had a walking stick, but they want to keep active and they want to manage and do those things. So it is really important to get across, if you're not using an aid or appliance, or you don't have an aid or appliance. For example, you might be waiting for an occupational therapy assessment to have some bars and things put into your bathroom, but not yet have them. Or you might be getting some physical help from somebody else. I know a lot of older couples who walk along holding each other up, for example. And quite often when I'm out walking with Becky, she'll hold her arm under mine so that I've got that bit of extra support on my right hand side as well as my walking stick. So it's getting those things across. Yes, using that aid or appliance is a specific descriptor point. So if you can demonstrate that, and particularly if that's been prescribed to you by a medical practitioner, make sure you get that across, that it's been prescribed. And that could be an occupational therapist, physiotherapist, or specialist, or whatever. Orthotics as well, if you wear orthotics in your shoes, those kind of things, all that sort of stuff counts. But also, if you've got an area where probably, maybe a medical professional has said to you, have you thought about using a walking stick? And you said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be independent and keep my strength up as much as possible. Then also indicate that. So it's both those things. So Edward, again, excellent point. Really important to note.
Sarah says she's the same. She's 43 and uses a walking stick and a rollator. Don't know what rollator.
Oh, yeah, one of those with the seat thing on it in the shopping basket. Yeah, they can be really good for a lot of people as well. Not for everyone, but they can be really useful. But partly because it's got a built-in seat, so you can sit down whenever you need. That seat is usually a box for you to put stuff in it. My preference is a mobility scooter, but unfortunately the battery on mine runs out pretty quick, so I can't.
We've got a lot of hills, that's why.
Yeah, and I'm whizzing along on the flat ground, get to a hill, like that. Very.
Brian Davies has recommended also a Nordic walking pole. Still helps, yeah.
Yeah, they can be quite helpful as well. Particularly, I did have a pole that kind of had a sort of.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like a Nordic walking pole. Some people use them like that, and that's great. But again, it's about finding out what works for you because of your, I like to use one stick so that I've got a hand free to do things and catch myself and things like that. But then that's got an impact on my elbow and my wrists. I get a lot of pain here. Horses for courses.
So Joanne made it clear that when she's doing the hoovering on the stairs, it has to be done in stages. 3 stairs, sit down until the pain subsides, then 3 more. Joanne, I have to tell you, I hate hoovering the stairs because I'm like a health and safety freak, and every time I do it, I think I'm just going to fall down, and this is how accidents happen. So I got one of those amazing coppery scrapey tools, mostly for cat hair because I'm a clean freak as well, and it is incredible on the stairs. And I sit on the stair and I just scrape it along, and I basically create like 5 or 6 giant new pogs out of the hair every week.
Just a reminder, Pog is the name of the cat.
Yeah. Pog, yes. Yeah, it's true. So yeah, it's really good. So yeah, if you are worried about sort of hoiking or it's really causing you a lot of pain because they're heavy as well, I would thoroughly recommend getting one of those. It's like a little copper. It looks a bit like.
Do you want to go and get it?
Yeah, I'll go get it.
We're advertising household products now.
I can't remember where I got it from. I think it was Amazon.
Yeah, these things, they pop up on Facebook like Temu and things like that, and it says, oh, look at this thing. I remember when she got it, she was very excited.
This is it. It's
yes.
You can get bigger ones.
So yeah, it's just a thing, and you can
and you could attach it to a pole.
It feels really weird as well when you rub it.
Don't use it on delicate fabrics. I did that and it completely ruined them.
So there you go. You can scrape a little bit at a time if you've got safety concerns and don't want to swing around the Hoover. Even these,
I think it was about £7, and it is incredible.
And there you go, household tip.
Yeah. I think it's called a copper carpet scraper or lint scraper, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah. That's it, I think.
Lovely. Well, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking to everyone again this evening. I am going to have to make some more effort to bring more folk to the channel who are in need of support and help by getting some more videos out there. I do recognise that. Obviously, my current job is a lot more involved than it was in the past when I started the channel. So I'm really grateful to everybody that you guys are still supporting it. Obviously, if you come across anybody in real life who wants to sort of join in and be a part of this community, then please do get involved. As I say, we are still looking into, can we create some sort of page or repository of some kind of thing, because obviously Edwards this evening's come out with a few few things that could be useful. We've had some really useful comments in previous episodes of different online resources that people can use. So it would be great if we can look at setting that up. It's just a question of finding the time. But thank you everybody for continuing to support us, and just it's good peer support even for us as well. So it's good to know that this little community is out there. And we'll sign off now. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with our health and wellbeing show, and the topic for that one is care and care homes, as we've said before. So we'll be looking at all of those things. So if you've got things you want to throw in, pop some comments over to us, ping us an email, or just join us on the night and just dive into the mix with us. That would be great. Big love to all of you, and
thanks,
do
everyone.
take care.
You're all fab.
You're all fab. Yes, do take care. See you all
Bye.
again soon.
Bye.